Q puts on a show and the Kings roll over the Bruins. I'll tell you why I continue to like what I see from this year's Kings team on this episode of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we're on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. The countdown to the regular season in the NHL continues. The Kings season opener is October 10th in Buffalo against the Sabres, 7 days away. The Kings home opener, October 24th in San Jose against the Sharks. Not in San Jose, against the San Jose Sharks. That is 21 days away. And the Kings are in Quebec for their final two preseason games, including Thursday night's game against the Boston Bruins. A bit of an unusual situation for an NHL team to be so far away from home for the final preseason games, but the move was made because of renovations going on at Crypto.com Arena. If you're an NHL fan of a certain age, you may or may not remember that Quebec City was once home to an NHL franchise. The Quebec Nordiques played in the NHL from 1979 to 1995 before moving off to Colorado to become the Avalanche. With the NHL likely looking to expand in the coming years, folks in Quebec are hoping that they can be an NHL city once again, and they seem to put on a good show, showing up for the Kings-Bruins game that was played on Thursday night. First ever preseason matchup between the Bruins and Kings, and usually in the preseason, NHL teams, to try and cut down costs, they schedule the preseason games as against more regional opponents than you would see, for example, in LA versus a Boston. But again, different circumstances with the Kings in Quebec. As for Boston, they played several of their NHL regulars, including their superstar David Pastrnak. One-time King Jonas Korpisalo was in net for the Bruins. Real quick, if you don't know, Boston having a lot of drama this preseason with their star goalie, Jeremy Swayman. He's sitting out looking for a new contract, and things are starting to get a bit ugly. But even without their top goalie, Boston expected to be a contender in the Eastern Conference. And to this point, I would say the toughest test for the LA Kings so far in their preseason schedule. As for the Kings lineup that they put out in Quebec, this should look very familiar, at least early going in the regular season. The Kings put out Anze Kopitar centering Alex Laferriere and Adrian Kempe, Philip Deneau centering Tanner Jeannot and Trevor Moore, Quinton Byfield centering Kevin Fiala and Warren Foegele, and the fourth line Alex Turcotte centering Akil Thomas and Andre Lee. The defensive pairings were Mikey Anderson and Jordan Spence, Kyle Burrows and Vladislav Gavrikov, and also Joel Edmondson with Brandt Clark. The goaltender was David Rittich with Darcy Kemper serving as the backup. This is likely to be the Kings' starting lineup for the opening night and what we're going to see most likely for the start of the regular season, except for maybe Andre Lee playing on that third line. It's probably going to be Trevor Lewis, but we'll talk more about Andre Lee coming up. And very interesting to see the defensive pairings in this one with Jordan Spence playing on the top pairing with Mikey Anderson. We will talk more about that coming up as well. As for the game, and I did want to mention, even though Anze Kopitar was, with Adrian Kempe and Alex Laferriere, that was the top line. However, Jim Hiller's starting the Philip Deneau line, a nod to Deneau, who is the only French-Canadian player on the Kings, and obviously had a good time playing in this game in his native Quebec. As far as thoughts on the game, nothing much going on as far as the opening period in this one. It looked like a couple of teams that, even though both teams had a lot of NHL regulars in the lineup, this was probably the first time, at least it was for the Kings, where this group was together as a whole. We've seen, for example, the Kopitar line was in one game, but they weren't with the Deneau line and the Byfield line. So this was the first time they were all kind of together. And even though they know each other, it's still the first game. And it kind of looked like that for both sides in the opening period. But things would heat up in the second period, particularly for the Kings and Quinton Byfield. LA would jump out to a 2-0 lead on back-to-back goals by Quinton Byfield. The first one, a beautiful 2-on-1 with Kevin Fiala. Fiala setting up Q, who puts it home. And then just seconds later, Quinton Byfield would find a loose puck in front of the net and put it in to make it 2-0. The Bruins, though, would score just seconds later. And after a period, more than a period of not a lot going on, we had 3 goals scored in the span of less than 2 minutes. But the Kings had a 2-1 lead after the second period. Into the third period, the Kings would commit their first penalty of the game, but LA would score shorthanded. Anze Kopitar and Adrian Kempe on a 2-on-1 with the captain feeding Juice, who buried the one-timer to make it 3-1. And then later on, a relatively harmless shot on goal, Quinton Byfield just threw out his stick, deflected in his third goal of the game for the hat trick to make it 4-1, and that would be the final score. As far as the game stats in this one, some of these preseason games kind of have some incomplete stats. So we didn't see, for example, what the faceoff situation was, how many hits or how many blocked shots. We did have shots on goal, which heavily favored the Kings, 32-12. As a matter of fact, the Bruins didn't have double digits shots on goal in any of the 3 periods. They had just 3 in the first, 4 in the second, and then 5 in the third. So the Kings obviously doing a pretty good job of limiting the Bruins' chances. And I will have to say, and we'll get more into this, obviously, but the Kings certainly looked like a team that was kind of ready for the regular season, and the Bruins were not so much for whatever reason in this one. As for the Kings' best line in this game, no doubt it was the Byfield line. I've talked about this line. I've really enjoyed watching them this preseason, how things are starting to progress between Quinton Byfield and Kevin Fiala. Great chemistry between those two guys. And Warren Fogle, I've said I really like his addition, does a lot of good things. He was a bit quiet in this game, but Fiala and Byfield look fantastic. They really have some good early chemistry together. As far as the thoughts on the game as a whole, I thought it was a very solid game for the Kings. I thought they out-hustled the Bruins. They outworked them. They finished their chances for the most part when they had them. Certainly not a perfect game for the Kings, but a lot more good than bad for sure. I almost wish this would have been the final preseason game, because this would have been a great game to kind of move into the regular season. Now we'll see. Maybe the Kings have just as good a game against the Florida Panthers in their preseason finale, but the Kings playing very, very good hockey in this one. They were the better team. They dictated the pace for the most part, and pretty darn solid effort for the LA Kings. A lot of hunting of the puck, right? This was a theme. Jim Hiller talking about it, GM Rob Blake talking about it being uncomfortable. We talked about the physical preseason. And this is about the Kings not only, forechecking, but creating chances off the forecheck and going to the net, right? Putting the puck on net, looking for rebounds, looking for deflections. We saw Quinton Byfield with, just a relatively harmless shot on goal, but he gets his stick in front of it, puts it in. And on his second goal, he gets a putback in front of the net, going to the net, getting shots on net and having people crash the net. It's very basic hockey. But when you can do it and you can get a group that has that kind of a mindset, putting shots on goal from wherever and crashing the net, it's basic, but it's very effective when you can get a lot of players, buying into that and how that works. And they're high percentage shots. When you're putting shots on net, when you're deflecting shots on net, when you're getting rebounds, those are high percentage shots. And those are obviously a lot easier to score more often than not. And I talked about finishing. The Kings twice had 2-on-1 opportunities. They didn't have any breakaways, but they had a couple of 2-on-1s, and they finished one shorthanded, one even strength, and they were textbook finishes. And then on the other side, Boston didn't. There was a 3-on-1 they had, and they were unable to finish it. So the Kings capitalizing on their chances. There was a 2-on-1 the Kings had, another shorthanded 2-on-1 with Trevor Moore and Philip Deneau that Moore did not finish on, but another great scoring opportunity. And the Kings looking good shorthanded. Speaking of the special teams, and again, this is more of the regular lineup we think we're going to see from the Kings this year. So what did the special teams look like? The first power play unit was Kopitar, Fiala, Kempe, Laferriere, and Clark. The second power play unit was Byfield, Moore, Deneau, Thomas, and Spence. A little surprised Akil Thomas was out there and not Alex Turcotte. Not sure if that's what we're going to see in the regular season, but that's what we saw in this game. As for the penalty kill unit, which was very strong in this game, and I think has been pretty strong throughout the preseason, the number one PK unit was Kempe, Kopitar, Gavrikov, and Burrows. And the second PK unit was Mordino, Anderson, and Spence. So a little bit of a different look as far as the defenders go when you look at the power play, but Jordan Spence has been the guy who's getting time on both the special teams unit, which is not a surprise. I thought as far as goaltending goes, big save David Riddick was solid in net. He had his best play was a really nice poke check on the Bruins top player, David Pastrnak, when he broke in on net on a good scoring chance. Other than that, not a lot of action for David Riddick, but the pucks that he saw, he was able to take care of pretty well. My crowning moment of the game, which may or may not be a segment that we keep going through the season, first period, one of the Bruins players took a run at the Kings, Alex Turcotte, and it wasn't anything overly outrageous or dirty, but he gave Turcotte a little extra, and immediately 3 Kings went after him. Vladislav Gavrikov, Kyle Burrows, and Andre Lee. And I loved seeing that. Now, I think the Kings are going to be a little bit more protective than Alex Turcotte because he's a young player, but also because of his history of injuries. And anybody that does anything a little bit over the line or on the line, they're going to react to that. And I thought it was very cool to see those 3 guys absolutely step up immediately and tell that Bruins player, no, you're not doing that, especially with him. And then Andre Lee dropped the gloves with that same player later on in the game. So good stuff. That was my crowning moment of the game for the LA Kings. So the Kings, you look at them overall. We talked about this a little bit on our Kings Roundtable show on Wednesday. If you missed that, go back and check it out. And, I'll certainly acknowledge, you look at a guy like a David Pastrnak for Boston, the Kings may not have one of those superstars on their roster, but Kempe and Fiala and the emerging Quinton Byfield, those are high-end players. So it's not like the Kings don't have high-end talent. They may not have a top 10 player on their team, but I think overall from what I'm seeing this preseason and the thing that's encouraging me a lot is maybe the Kings are greater than greater than their parts, right? The whole is greater than the parts. When they come together and play as a team like they have been so far this preseason, and specifically in this game against Boston, this is still, hockey is still very much a team sport. And if you can get, as Jim Fox likes to talk about, 5 men connected and things like that, but it seems like the Kings have really bought into what Jim Hiller is selling. And again, so far so good here in this preseason for the LA Kings. One other note I always like to mention after a game, no injuries to report. There was one kind of scary moment when one of the Boston players, I don't know if he lost an edge or if he just went in a little bit too hard, but he went into David Riddick and kind of shook him up a little bit. But Riddick stayed in the game and ended up being okay. So no injuries to report from what was overall a very solid effort and win for the LA Kings. Up next, we're going to talk about some of the position battles and some of the other players looking to step up and how they played in this game. That's next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats and view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. How cool is that? We love to bet on the NFL. The Rams are 3-point favorites against the Packers this week. Chargers have a bye week this week, but we've got postseason baseball you can bet on. Dodgers are a plus 350 to win it all. USC, 8.5 favorites against Minnesota. And of course, we've got NBA and hockey right around the corner. You can check it all on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Get in on the action, and you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Well, the Kings are very close to finalizing their roster. 23 players right now, or I should say 26 players right now on the roster. They need to get down to 23. So 3 players will be sent down to Ontario or placed on waivers, and hopefully they clear and get sent down. But of those players that are looking to make the team that were in the lineup in Thursday's game against Boston, I think Andre Lee was probably the biggest name. He's certainly a guy who's on the bubble. Now, did he do anything that really stood out in this game? No, other than maybe getting into the fight. But he was on the fourth line with Alex Turcotte and Akil Thomas. And I've made it no secret that I like Andre Lee. I like his size. I like his fact that he will throw the body around, not afraid to go to the net. And when you're talking about a fourth line player who you're looking to get something out of in limited minutes, I think he's kind of a perfect type of guy that's going to do that. He plays 14 minutes a night. He'll probably get 4 or 5 hits if you throw him out there. So again, nothing big from him, but the fact that he was in the lineup to begin with, I thought certainly said that the Kings are looking to give him a shot and they've liked what they've seen from him so far this preseason. Whether he sticks with the club to start the season, we'll see. I think he will. But then again, like I said, I've kind of preferred what he brings to the table for the LA Kings. I still think Trevor Lewis is going to be that third forward, but I think Andre Lee will be the extra forward once the season starts, but we shall see. Alex Turcotte is going to be centering the fourth line when the season starts. He has had a solid preseason, had a good scoring chance in this game against Boston, also drew a penalty, and just really like the jump that he has in his game. I know that some were a bit disappointed when the LA Kings let Blake Lizotte go, but I think if Alex Turcotte does in fact stay centering that fourth line, I think he can be at least a very similar player to Blake Lizotte. And frankly, I think he's got a little bit more high-end talent. I think he could give a little bit more production than Blake Lizotte. But it's been a very encouraging preseason for Alex Turcotte. And another solid game, not spectacular, but a solid game for him, flying around and trying to make things happen in limited ice time in this game against Boston. If you listened or watched that roundtable show that we had with Austin Stanovich and Carl Balikian on Wednesday, you heard them disagree with me when it came to my thoughts about Brandt Clarke playing on the top pairing defensively in place of Drew Doughty. They both thought Jordan Spence should get that assignment, and we did see Spence in this game get that assignment. Now, is that going to be what we're going to see? Are we going to see Jordan Spence and Mikey Anderson together to start the season on that top pairing? I would say that this was a decent sign that is, in fact, something that head coach Jim Hiller and his staff are considering. And look, I've always been a fan of Jordan Spence. My reasoning for Brandt Clarke is just I think he's a higher end talent, and I think eventually that's where he's going to be anyway. So let's give him a head start on being on the top pairing. But I have no issue with Jordan Spence being there. I would prefer him over Kyle Burroughs. His game is just solid. He's smart. He makes good decisions defensively. He's very aware, Jordan Spence, of what he does well and what he doesn't do well. And he always seems to play to his strengths. He never tries to do too much. We saw that a little bit with Brandt Clarke in this game, but he knows what he can do. He's very smart positionally. And he had a real nice play in this one. Not a lot from Jordan Spence in this game, but there was one play that really stood out. Mikey Anderson kind of got beat along the boards. He got behind the offensive player for Boston who was going down the ice, and Jordan Spence came flying over and helped out defensively. And, that's something you got to see. If somebody gets by your defensive partner, you got to be there to help out and take over and make a good defensive play and keep a scoring chance from happening. And Jordan Spence did that. He's solid. And if that ends up being the top pairing, Anderson and Spence, I don't have a big problem with that at all. As for Brandt Clarke, probably what you would expect in this game from a young, talented player. Some mistakes and some high-end plays as well. I think Clarke sometimes feels like he has to do something positive every time he has the puck on his stick, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But there are times, and he will learn this, when you have to just dump the puck in, when you just have to hold the puck sometimes, when you don't have to make a play every time. Hold the puck and then, wait for something to open up. Don't force it. He did a couple of times in this game, but I will say he also had the most impressive defensive play in this game. I mentioned it earlier, but the Bruins had a 3-on-1 break-in, and they didn't even get a shot on goal because Brandt Clarke was there to prevent a scoring chance and intercepting a pass in the second period. So that's probably what you're going to get from Brandt Clarke this year, at least to start. Hopefully it gets more consistent as we get towards the end of the season, but he can make things happen. He's kind of like Kevin Fiala. Fiala does that as well. He can make some amazing things happen, but every once in a while he'll do something because he just feels like he has to do something all the time. And it's kind of learning that balance of when to make the play, when to take the chance, and when to, just go ahead and make the easy play or the smart play. And Brandt Clarke certainly is going to learn that. I did want to mention Mikey Anderson. And he's certainly a guy, he's a veteran at this point. Wearing a letter on his sweater now with Drew Doughty being out. And Jim Hiller kind of called him out sort of in practice and said to the media that Mikey's got to give him more offensively. And I thought that was a great, great move on Jim Hiller's part because I think Mikey Anderson has got a little bit comfortable. And I think as fans, frankly, we might expect it too, that, we say, oh, Mikey's just a defensive guy. He's probably the best Kings shutdown defenseman. And we're just not going to expect anything offensively from him. And look, to be clear, no one's expecting, Mikey Anderson to be Quinn Hughes or anybody like that, or Brant Clark. But it doesn't mean he can't contribute offensively by looking for his shot. And I think that's what Jim Hiller is saying. Don't just defer to other players. If you've got a shot, put it on net. And I thought that Mikey Anderson, at least in the first period, looked for his shot. He was looking to get it on net. And we're talking about this kind of new look Kings, puck hunting, going to the net, looking for rebounds. Having a guy just put it on net from the point is valuable. And again, it's not spectacular, but I think that's what Jim Hiller wants to see from Mikey Anderson. I thought at least in the first period, we saw that from Mikey Anderson. And I hope that's something that he keeps in the front of his mind. Yeah, still, you're about the defense, and that's going to be what, carries you throughout the game. But when the opportunity arises, get that shot on net and make things happen and make a goalie make a save and get a rebound. So I like the move by Jim Hiller of telling Mikey Anderson, hey, we know what you can do defensively, but there's no reason why you can't be a contributor offensively as well. We still need to give out our 3 stars of the game for this Kings win. I think you probably know who the number 1 star is going to be, but we'll talk about that and also talk about the Kings overall in this game against the Bruins. Continue that. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, those of us that live in LA, so lucky. We got so many opportunities to see live events, whether it's sports or comedy, theater events, plays, concerts. It's really got a lot of everything here in Los Angeles for you to check out. But no matter what you like, what your preference is, you need to do what I do, and that's use Gametime to get all of your tickets. Gametime is a very easy and great way to find inexpensive tickets. They've got something called Gametime Picks. That's new. It helps you get tickets to your favorite live events even easier, filters out all the fluff so you only have incredible deals on great seats. Don't have to waste your time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. Dodger playoff tickets coming up. They've got great prices there. You need to check that out. And with your discount, that would help as well. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL, and you get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL, and get $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. I did want to get to our 3 stars of the game in this victory over the Boston Bruins, and no surprise who the number 1 star is. That would be Quinton Byfield with the hat trick in this one, and you got to be very excited what we're seeing from Q as he is finally emerging as a real star. There was no, the 3 goals he scored in this one, none of them were spectacular necessarily. It wasn't like we've seen some pretty big highlight goals from Q, and he didn't have that in this game, but all very solid. The 2-on-1 with Fiala, great job burying it and putting it away. And then, scoring in front of the net. He's, going to be more around the net now, playing the center position, and he's got good hands. And it may have seemed like not really spectacular goals, putting in a goal, in the crease and then deflecting a shot, but those are very important. And again, high percentage chances around the net. Quinton Byfield, great job in having a 3-goal game against the Bruins. Hopefully see a lot more of that this year. Kevin Fiala set up Quinton Byfield on 2 of his 3 goals, and Kevin will be our number 2 star for this game. Again, super, super creative player, high-end talent. Every once in a while, he'll do something, hold on to it a little bit too long and maybe try and make a move around somebody he shouldn't. But he always kind of makes up for it in the end with some sort of high-end, spectacular type of play. He keeps defenses on their toes. He keeps eyes on him when he's got the puck on his stick, because you have to respect what he can do offensively. So Kevin Fiala, our number 2 star, and our number 3 star, let's go with the only other goal scored in this one other than Quinton Byfield, and that would be Adrian Kempe on the shorthanded chance with Anze Kopitar. Those are our 3 stars of the game in the win over the Boston Bruins. We do have a bit of Kings news to pass along. We had that Kings Roundtable show on Wednesday, so we didn't really have a chance to pass along a note, and that was that Kings defenseman Jacob Moverar who was placed on waivers, did in fact clear waivers. He was not claimed by another team, so he has been assigned to Ontario in the AHL, and obviously glad no team decided to pick him up. While I'm not super high on Jacob Overar, I think he's a good, solid depth defenseman that everybody needs to have in their organization. He could fill in on the bottom pairing if necessary if there's an injury, and I think he could do a very respectable job. So Jacob Overar, not picked up by any team, still a part of the LA Kings organization and available if something were to happen there in the bottom end of the Kings defensive lineup. I did want to mention real quick, just a heads up, if you're an NHL fan, you might not know this, but the NHL season actually starts tomorrow morning, LA time, 10 a.m. in Prague in the Czech Republic. The New Jersey Devils are taking on the Buffalo Sabres. That's the first game of the year. It's on the NHL Network. If you happen to be able to watch it and you want to watch some real hockey, it is starting 10 a.m. LA time tomorrow morning between the Devils and the Sabres in Prague. All right, for you everydayers, I do want to mention real quick, the Kings are going to have a lot of East Coast games to start the season. And as far as the show tonight, it didn't really make a lot of sense to me to record a preview show and then post it like right around the time the game was actually starting. It made more sense to just wait till the game was over and record a recap show. So we're probably going to do a lot more of that, especially at the start of the season when the Kings are on the East Coast and they have those early start times, West Coast time. So I don't know how many people are going to watch this after the game, but maybe, watch it tomorrow morning, listen to it on your morning commute. But for the games that are on the East Coast early in the regular season, going to try to have more of these kind of late night recaps for you guys to enjoy here on Locked on LA Kings. For you everydayers, you know this, Friday is our fan feedback show. So that's coming up on Friday. Are you encouraged by what you're seeing from this LA Kings team? Are you excited about what you've seen so far? Which players do you like? What do you think about some of the lineups? What do you think about some of the lines? Your thoughts on the LA Kings and what we've seen so far this preseason. It's your show, Friday fan feedback show, your chance to sound off on anything involving the LA Kings. The email address to get in on that is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And if you're watching on YouTube, we love when you leave your comments in the comment section as well. If you want to stay interactive with the show, X, Twitter, Instagram, we are at Locked On LA Kings. That was a fun game, fun win over the Bruins. Hopefully we'll see a lot more of that as we go forward into the regular season, but one more preseason game to go, and we will talk about that coming up as well. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We will talk to you on Friday. And as always, go Kings go.